So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists and then our host for the night. So our first panelist is Brother Anthony McGriff. Anthony McGriff was born and raised in Syracuse, New York. His path in education began when he was 16, working as a volunteer violence prevention educator for the Beer House. He is Syracuse University and Relay GSC alum with a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in education. He is currently a teacher in the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Lead for Exceed Charter School, located in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Anthony is a firm believer that gender-based violence is and always has been a men's issue. And he uses his experience to work in various capacities with educational organizations to create safer spaces and re-examine old policies that maintain old power structures and inequity. In January 2021, Anthony will begin earning his Doctor of Education and Learning and Organizational Change from Baylor University, and he hopes to use the degree to help him one day open up a school of his own. So thank you, Anthony, for being here. Our next panelist, Dexter McKinney. Dexter has earned a bachelor's and 2 master's degree from Syracuse University. He's a global entrepreneur, consultant, and is most passionate about his artistic career. He can be seen in the critically acclaimed productions such as Mrs. America on Hulu and When They See Us on Netflix. Another panelist, we have Grant Mays. So Grant Mays has a bachelor's degree in sociology, which he acquired from Syracuse University, as well as a master's in public safety, specializing in criminal justice. He is currently working towards the doctorate, specializing in adult education, and is currently a police detective residing in New Jersey. And they are not panelists, but we have special guests in the house. We have Dr. Keith A. Alford, and also his Director of Diversity, LaShan M Lovelace. So thank you guys for attending. And last but not least, we have our host, Keenan Hale. So Keenan is a federal lobbyist and government consultant at the law firm Gray Robinson. He has several years of experience in the federal government arena, serving as legislative assistant to Congressman Al Green from August 2017 until joining Gray Robinson in 2019. Prior to this role, Keenan served as Congressman Green's executive assistant beginning in November 2015. In these roles, Keenan staffed committee hearings, directed the members' legislative agenda, and provided policy recommendations on social justice, defense, small business, financial tech, transportation, telecommunications, and education. Keenan currently serves as the Syracuse Football Club Board of Directors and previously served as the membership chair for the Congressional Black Associates, which is a congressional staff organization of the United States House of Representatives. And with that, Keenan, I give the floor to you.
One, I want to thank Theta Xi as a chapter for putting on this discussion tonight. One of the quick observations that I have is that the question, when they see us, it's a very pointed question. However, when we think about it, there are only minorities on this discussion here. And so what I want everybody to be thinking about during this discussion is how do we get our message that we come from today in front of those that are not in our community, others that are not minorities. So when you're thinking about the responses that you hear the panelists give, and also using your own personal experience, I also want you to be thinking about how you can create this change through the words that are given out today. And with that said, I want to thank the other panelists and thank you all for attending. Y'all took time out of your busy schedule to join us tonight, and we will get going. So without further ado, I will begin with our first question. And this is going to be a general question. I will ask Grant Mays, Brother Grant Mays, to lead off. And the question is this: How has your career been influenced by everything going on right now with Black Lives Matter and the criminal justice system? You're on mute.
Gotcha. Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. Thanks, Brother Kwaku, and all the brothers who so eloquently read my bio, and just I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. I hope and pray everyone's maintaining safety. The protocols in place. COVID is obviously impacted us all, so please, I hope and pray that everyone's being safe. Most importantly, before I answer this question, I hope everybody voted or is planning to vote. I think that's imperative. I do believe if you do not vote, you pretty much forfeit your right to complain, pretty much. So go ahead and vote. But Brother Keenan Hale, to answer your question, um, we're seeing a lot of changes within the law enforcement community from my perspective, which I believe is a great thing. We're seeing more transparency. I just met with the Union County prosecutor in Union County, New Jersey, and she and the chief of detectives enacted full body worn cameras throughout the entire county of Union County, New Jersey. That's imperative. So I highly recommend that if you don't know what this program is, please contact your chief of police, your local authorities. A lot of people don't know that you have a powerful voice. The citizens do. When we gather up and we go to the proper channels, your voice can be heard. There's a lot of different ways in which that can happen. I do a presentation called Know Your Rights, and I'm not going to take everyone's time. And I help people to understand that your voice does count and matter. There's a couple of ways in which you can do this. Every police department has an IA, Internal Affairs, in which you can report every complaint. If that's not being heard, you can go to the county prosecutor's office, okay, and talk to them and say, hey, I reached out to this department. They're not complying with I want to know the what the investigation is entailing. If that doesn't work, you can go to the attorney general of your state, which is the top law enforcement officer in your state, and make a complaint. So I would just say we're seeing more transparency with body-worn cameras. A lot of departments now are enacting in which you can open request, which is a open discovery request, some police officers' backgrounds as far as their history with use of force. So I encourage everybody to reach out to your police departments, find out their use of force guidelines, engage with the community. Real quick, Brother Hale, your question was, how do we put this in front of other people? And I think it's imperative that we reach out to our chiefs of police. We reach out to our mayors, our local officials, and have them sit down with us. We can get that done. We can. So I encourage everyone to reach out to those proper channels. But no, we're seeing a lot of change. People are using their voice to complain. Officers are being held more accountable, and we're seeing more transparency. So to answer your question, we're seeing a lot more transparency. A lot more people are developing community policing programs. Okay, what that is where each department has a liaison that goes out to the community and engage with the community in a different type of capacity other than arresting you or dealing with you in a negative manner. So you have coffee with cops, bagel with cops. I don't know if Syracuse DPS has some of these incentives, but if they don't, please go to DPS and Syracuse Police and say, hey, we would like to come to coffee with a cop. We would like to come meet our detectives, our chief, our cops. So that way, if you happen to encounter them, it doesn't have to go left pretty much. You can have a more positive interaction with those officers. So I encourage you to reach out to your officials and find out about their community policing objectives and get involved with the police department.
To follow back up on that, when folks do have an issue with law enforcement, do you have any specific thoughts on qualified immunity and whether that should be eliminated, or any other thoughts that you want to share with us about qualified immunity so that maybe we can be more aware of the options and what's at stake? I think you're back on.
Great point. I'm sorry, I muted myself. So qualified immunity for law enforcement officers who use force. I think that should be eradicated. I think law enforcement officers should be held accountable just as if a citizen would. I tell people when I do my presentations that yes, I have a badge, but under that is a heart. I'm a person like anybody else. And if I commit a crime, I should be subject to the same penalties as somebody else. And my goal is to reach out to these different departments and ensure that we are recruiting diverse candidates and candidates who resemble the communities in which we serve. That's something I actually talked to the Union County prosecutor about. It's about we need to have our cops resemble the communities in which they serve. How many black and brown cops are in Syracuse? How many black and brown chiefs are there? The command staff and up, lieutenant and up, not just cops. How many people in your department from the rank of lieutenant and up, which is the command staff, resemble you? If something happens in the police department and a critical decision has to be made, lieutenants and up have the ability to make that happen. And if all of them are sitting at the table and nobody looks like me, well, then there's no one there to vouch for me. So to answer your question, my department just had an officer get fired for potential use of force. So we're seeing officers be held more accountable, and I disagree with the immunity. Cops should be held just as should be held accountable, if not more, than other citizens.
Appreciate that, Brother Mays. Some great insight, and I don't want to take up too much time, following back up there, but we can discuss if there's more time later on. I do want to jump in our second question because it kind of is a good follow-up, and I want to ask this to Dr. Alford, if you don't mind. In your opinion, what kinds of reform do you think are necessary to improve the justice system?
There we go. Had difficulty unmuting myself. First of all, thank you for the question. And I also want to salute the brothers of Phi Beta Sigma for this effort and for the efforts this entire week. A special shout out to Brother Marques Palmer, who is a student in the School of Social Work. And also, I know that we see representation from other panelitic members. I want to acknowledge them as well. So your question is a good one. What kinds of reforms, if any, are necessary to improve the justice system? I guess, how long do we have tonight to talk? Because there is a great deal of reforms needed. There's a great deal of education needed. And so when I think about actually question one and question two, I think about the fact that it's about educating, but helping the people who are in the criminal justice system, who are actually carrying out sentencing policies, carrying out policies associated with how the criminal justice system is governed. Do they fully understand what it means to actually be an anti-racist? Do they fully understand what it means to live as a Black man or as a Black woman in this society? And so it's an educational piece that we have to encourage, and we have to also make sure it happens on a regular basis with all of the, I would say, stewards, if you will, of the criminal justice system, but educating them more so than just providing one-by-one instruction, but sharing with them what it is that we're experiencing as Black people in this country. So when I think about the Black Lives Matter movement, and I think about how I continue in my work as Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the university, and in my work as an educator, continue to try to express to folks, yes, Black Lives Matter because they haven't mattered before, and helping people to understand that racism is a function of society. It is really a foreign concept for a lot of folks. And you would think that after 400 years of a racial pandemic, we talk about COVID-19 here in 2020, but when you talk about 400 years of a racial pandemic, folks would know that racism is a function of society, but there's still this, well, I believe that we can coexist and we can get along. Yes, we can coexist and we can get along if you understand my lived experience and respect what I've gone through. And so I think that, again, education, but education in an experiential way with respect to the lived experiences that we're facing. And I say that in reference to Black men and in reference to Black women, because our walk is different, but it's also similar in many ways.
Can I just add on to that? And I want to speak, especially what Dr. Alford said at the end. I agree with everything that was said, and I think that we also need to start educating each other about how we are intersectional beings, right? So he made the distinction between like a Black man's experience is different from a Black woman's, and yet they have all these different commonalities. You can also add being a Muslim. You can also add being an immigrant. You can also add growing up in poverty, and all these different labels that only compound the amount of trauma that you are at risk, that you can be exposed to. And just to like give an example of what I think like this could look like is like just more trauma-informed training. I'm a teacher, and I know how dangerous it is to train teachers to respond to behaviors and not whole people. Because people have context, people have trauma and don't know they're being triggered and have trauma, right? So there are all these different things that we need to take into consideration. And we can't ever think that we're at a point where we know enough to be good. I may sound a little radical here, but I don't think cultural competency is a thing. I don't think anybody can say, I know you enough to understand why you react the way you do to every other person, even if you do share an identity with them, right? Every Muslim I meet isn't gonna have the same experience as me. Every biracial person, every person who meets my identities, I'm an identical twin, and my brother can't even tell you why I make some of the decisions that I do. So keeping that cultural humility in mind when we're educating law enforcement and anybody who's serving the people of this country, and also remembering that we are complex and it's a learning process. And then just to connect what you said before, Keenan, we need to call people out and call them in. It doesn't make rational sense to solve racism without white people because they're the ones who benefit, who created it, and they're the problem, right? And I don't think it's fair. It's not. And it feels like there's a burden on Black people, and there is. And maybe someone wants to push me on this, but I don't think you can solve racism without white people. And I don't think you can solve, just like I don't think you can solve sexism without men. You have to be willing to admit you're a part of the problem. You benefit from the culture, you benefit from the silence, and it's your obligation to check your privilege and make sure you're providing more equity for the people who are suffering from the issues you benefit from.
Well, Anthony, I mean, I really appreciate, that insight there. And you actually leaned into this next question that, I wanted to ask you. And that was, regarding how you think white supremacy culture influences not only the criminal justice system, but also all the other conversations that we're having right now in the current climate. So if you don't mind, can you take it away for us?
I think Dr. Alford started with how much time do we have? I mean, other than the fact that the Constitution was written by slave owning people who didn't think Black people were people, like, where do we start here? I think that white supremacy culture is in everything. You can be a Black person and perpetuate white supremacy culture. It's not just about what you think, it's about how you think. So I'll give you an example. You can be a Black, we can acknowledge that it's wrong for a cop to harass a Black person and stop them because of how they look, right? Their skin color and the way they're dressed. So we should also be able to stand as Black men, or as men, period, that's wrong to harass women by the way they look and the way they are dressed. It is the same tactic. It is the same strategy. All you've done is switch up the identity of the oppressor. So white supremacy culture exists everywhere, and we perpetuate it in a whole bunch of ways, and we just need to be humble enough to admit that, like, it's in us, and it's in us in ways that we don't even understand. And we have to be open to having that conversation. But I can say, like, in education, one of the ways white supremacy culture exists is that, Black kids are suspended at 3 times the rate of white kids. And I think a lot of that has to do with teachers don't understand, and we don't respond to multi-generational trauma. Trauma looks like arguing. It looks like fighting. It looks like losing sleep because you've been up all night and your parents are arguing. All of these things can be misinterpreted for defiance and equal sendouts or suspensions. What do those do? They isolate you from the resources you need, just like prison. They can often put you back into the same environment where the trauma is being caused, just like a prison, right? You just cut them off from anybody who could help them, just like prison, right? So I think that if I, as an educator, someone who serves the public and works by the rules that were created by our founders who were racist, I'm willing to acknowledge that. I think that all public servants, police, and whoever it is, need to acknowledge that the laws and policies and structures were created by white supremacy culture. And there are things that we don't know of and that we do know of that we need to address. We just have to stay open to the conversation and keep pushing forward.
I mean, that last, all of that was great, but what you just said, I thought was pretty important. And that's, how are we getting those that are not in our communities? How are we able to infiltrate and to get them to see where we're coming from? How can we articulate that to them so that they're able to continue? Go ahead.
There's always a place you can identify with somebody. I don't care what you say, you can identify with somebody. Just like I made the connection between being a Black man and perpetuating white supremacy culture and being like a white cop who may harass somebody based off how they look, right? Stop and frisk in New York City prove that that bias is there, right? Or even let's take Trump supporters, and a lot of people who say, I can't understand Trump supporters. He's a sexual, he's committed a sexual assault, whatever. But you can pay to go see the Chris Brown concert, or you're gonna pay for that pay-per-view to go see Floyd Mayweather fight though, right? In both cases, and I don't think they should be held to the same standard, right? I don't want to push that. I don't think that an athlete needs to be held to the same standard. I think they should held to higher standards. But what I'm saying is that I think there are places where we can understand people, and if we start having conversations that don't come from the goal of I'm trying to prove my point of view right, and start having the conversations and being brave enough to have the conversations to understand someone who's different from us, then we can create a safe space where the conversation is had. But that doesn't happen if you come to it with your mind fixed and unwilling to be malleable in your point of view.
Yeah, and I had a follow-up, but I know we, we're limited on time here, so I kind of want to make sure we get everybody else involved. Going to our next question, I want Grant to take this one back up here, and this is, what does the phrase defund the police mean to you?
Okay, I got it. Okay, great question. We're hearing the term defund the police a lot with this political campaign and election coming up. The term simplistically means to take resources and valuable resources away from departments. In my opinion, I think that's counterproductive. We need to train officers. We need to give them more sensitivity training. I just had a bias training today in the state of New Jersey for all cops. So, I mean, we need to continue to train our officers and build community policing divisions within each police department. I want to see a department where we see a Black chief and we're not surprised. I want to go to a police department where the director of public safety is a Black man and I don't go, oh man, he's Black. That's the world I want to see. And that's my goal before I retire from this field. I want to see more Black and brown people at the command staff level of law enforcement. So we need training. We need officers to get that training and build those community policing departments within that department, where there's officers who are hired to go into the community and to do things within the community, whereas it's volunteering, it's bringing kids into the department for a field trip. It's making positive interaction with your law enforcement officials, so that if you happen to get stopped on a Friday night by a cop, hey, I remember you from Cops and Bagels. Hey, I remember you from this area. That's the goal. So defund the police simplistically means to take funds away. To me, I think we should be giving our law enforcement officers the valuable resources. A lot of departments now are putting together teams. I forgot the name off the top of my head, but when they respond to a call, to bring, if it's a certain call, if the call is not exigent, then depending on certain calls, to bring a non-law enforcement person on the call. I've heard that, and that's going to take resources to make that happen. So I think that is a great initiative to bring someone who's non-law enforcement on scene. I had a shooting the other night where a young Black man was shot and killed, and my heart went out to him and their family. And there was a team that came of pastors and preachers and people who came to console the mom. And there was some cops with the mom, off-duty cops consoling the mom. So I think we need to allocate funds necessary to law enforcement officers for proper training, nonviolent crisis intervention training, verbal judo classes in which they have, where you can use your biggest weapon, which is your mouth, to de-escalate situation. Cops need more de-escalation training. I'm telling you right now, from the inside out, they're not getting enough training. So we need to provide those funds. I'm telling you straight up from the source, cops are not getting the training because of staffing. Every time we actually go to training, we don't have enough bodies on the road. Okay, so we need more cops on the road, because I can't put in for a day to go to training because they say we don't have enough bodies. So that's my answer. I think we need to allocate funds and resources to officers so that they can be better equipped when dealing with situations such as a George Floyd, such as instances that should have never happened. That's my answer, Brother Cal.
I appreciate that, Brother Mays. I want to get to Dexter, man, because I think it's very relevant to some alum that we now have at the university, and your current, your previous experience in the movie when they see us. And the question for you, Dex, is how has your real experience with the Central Park Five influenced your understanding of what's happening in the criminal justice system, not only then, but also today?
Yeah, sure. Well, for starters, greetings to everyone. Thanks again for showing up. And I'll preface this way. Like, for starters, my real experience with the criminal justice, you guys can hear me okay, right? I'm not. My real experience, started when I was young. My first encounter with the criminal justice system, I started visiting prisons as a child, right? Going to visit cousins and, friends of the family, things like that. And then just having my own run-in as a young person. I remember Destiny USA used to be called the Carousel Mall. And so I'm from Syracuse, and we used to go to the Carousel Mall, and it's Syracuse, right? So it's cold, and I got on a Scully maybe and some black gloves, and the police, it was me, myself and a friend of mine. As soon as we walked into the mall, just harassing us. What are you doing here? Get out. You trying to rob the place? Why you got those gloves on? I'm like, it's December, bro. Like, so just feeling some sort of tension there from the beginning. I'm actually going to have to switch spaces. I knew this was going to happen as soon as I started speaking. But anyway, excuse me. Sorry about that. But, so I've had my experiences early. And then, so even with the When They See Us experience, prior to me getting on set and booking that, which was obviously a dream come true from an artistic standpoint, I was already super into the documentary 13th, which Ava DuVernay put out. It's like free on YouTube. It's available on Netflix. So that was really the eye opener for me, just the way they broke it down. And I've read the new Jim Crow, and that was essentially just the film version of that. But if you haven't read the new Jim Crow, definitely read that. So me just having those already going into this experience, and knowing that from an artistic lens, a lot of times what happens is people empathize a little more when they can kind of like see this character and understand the story and see them as a child. And so I knew, just based on the things that were at play, that this was going to be a big deal. And being on set, in my scene, I'm in a jail, or in a prison or jail. And, on set, we have like therapists, trauma a trauma team. Just if it gets too palpable and too emotional, you can kind of go off to the side and have somebody that you good. And it was just heavy. And watching, the director Ava DuVernay, I had done some things prior to that. That was obviously the biggest up until that, probably still the biggest. But watching her just run that set and tell her story, right? She obviously wrote it and directed it, but it's just like the little things that she's in charge of this whole set. All these people are answering to her. And when you look at that scene, we're in a lineup, right? And Corey Wise is kind of just getting booked. And everybody at the beginning, when we first shot it, everybody was Black that was in the lineup, kind of coincidentally. And Ava saw it and was like, oh, hold up. No. Let me get you up out of there. Let me get a white prisoner, and so when you look at that scene, it goes white guy, Corey Wise, myself, and then probably the rest are Black. But it's just, even to kind of circle back on that first question that we opened with, like, how is the industry changing? It's like, we're allowed to tell our stories now. So if you're like a storyteller of some sort and you got this vision, now is a great time to tell a Black story, and it's just receptive, and you just get little things like that. Like, no, we're not going to paint this picture of Tarzan in Africa played by some Caucasian man. Like, no, we're going to tell our stories with pharaohs that, look like they might have lived in Africa, and so that's just a real thing. When we get a chance to tell our own narrative, it's just so important, especially for kids who, a lot of times what they see is what's outside. And I grew up in a tough neighborhood. So what I saw was, you could be an athlete, you could be a hustler, you could be a gangster, but there weren't a lot of actors on my block, and so the narrative we tell ourselves is important. Like, no, I'm going to be a learner. I'm going to be a person that can learn how to do things and adapt and have different experiences and all of these different things. So yeah, I don't know if I kind of rambled a little bit, but what was the question again, actually? Sorry. How was that influence on the criminal? Yeah, I mean, again, it was obviously meeting the people, getting to talk to them and getting to just, I knew the story. People knew the story. There's a documentary on When They See Us specifically. That was a huge documentary, and we were all encouraged to watch it prior to the shoot. But I mean, that you watch that, to me, that kind of just broke me. It's just like, man, these are kids. Like, these are real small children that I didn't know it happened that way. Like, and I've been arrested. I've gone through my issues. When I got arrested, actually, I was already a college student at SU. So I had a college ID in my pocket, and I got different treatment just based on that. So that was the first time I kind of knew I had a little privilege in this world, because I had a Syracuse ID. But my friend who was on parole, and we all just got into the same fight. Somebody got stabbed. He got treated like a criminal. And this is my friend. Like, we grew up together. The only difference was he had gotten in trouble and got a felony before it was, any time for him to expunge it or, correct it. And I didn't. So I got to go to Syracuse and he got to go to jail. And, it was just, I just knew kind of going into it, but, seeing the way that they can do that was certainly an eye opener.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dex, man. And I'm actually going to follow right back up with you.
Sure.
But I also want all the other panelists, I'll call on you as soon as he finishes up to answer this question before we get into the general Q&A from everyone else. And the question is, based off of what you've been saying, and you've kind of elicited certain feelings that you've had, where do we go from here? I know each of you have kind of touched on it in your various questions and in your responses, but if you could quickly summarize where you think we should be going, and to not be complacent, even if we have a change in administration and folks doing things a little differently.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think we're in a tough spot. I think we get a lot of dangerous rhetoric from leadership that, entices violence. And when we look at state-sponsored violence, particularly anti-Blackness, which is really, as we know, systematic and has been here since the advent of this country, you can find as many interesting facts as to why it happens to like certain communities as you can about why it doesn't happen to other communities as pervasively and as insidiously. So people may argue, well, what happened to George Floyd, that could have happened to anybody. Police kill people every day or often enough. And to me, it's like, okay, but that's a problem. Like Dave Chappelle has this thing where he goes, you can't have a few bad apples as pilots working as airliners. And it's just like, well, most of our pilots going to get you where you need to be, but some of them might plant you on the side of a mountain. It's not, it's just not okay. And so I just think the reality is some people don't have their voices as easily heard. And, whether that's because they're disenfranchised or they're poor or they're a diaspora or, Black or brown, and especially specifically as Black and brown people, we often feel like we can't get offended. Others can, but we really can't be speaking out and ruffling feathers. And I just think we have to be cognizant of this. There's nobody ever in the history of the world that has really gotten respect that hasn't demanded it. So for me, what this is really about is like looking at each other, seeing each other, and demanding that respect that we deserve from each other, as holding ourselves accountable, holding ourselves to that same standard as we're gonna try to hold other communities, right? Because we really can't have one without the other. I know that there's this quote a lot of people have been kind of using lately. It's like, they're lucky we want equality instead of revenge. And I'm just more inclined to push for equity, because I feel like with equity, we can fund our own equality.
Yeah, I sure appreciate you sharing that. I think it's a very important point and something that we definitely should highlight, because at the end of the day, we've seen over the hundreds of years of being oppressed and being the downcast and downtrodden. We've seen what that does to man, and we've learned from that, and we are moving forward in a direction as to not put some other community in that same position. So I think it's very important that you brought that up, and that quote is really impactful. And if I could, I see we only have about 2 minutes. I want to actually, Dr. Alford, if you could just go ahead and wrap that one up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Let me know if you need me to repeat.
Unmuting you. Okay, very good. Repeat the question, because I know we have other panelists who want to chime in as well.
Yes, absolutely. So my question was, with what are your current feelings with the state of affairs in our country, but where do we go from here as well? And you kind of touched on this earlier on, but I kind of wanted you to expand a little bit more.
Absolutely, and thank you for the opportunity to expand. And it's hard to follow my good friend and brother, Dexter McKinney. So I'm going to do my best. But he is a Phi Beta Sigma man, so all kudos to that, right? But I appreciate this opportunity to actually have the dialogue that we're having, because we're all focused on progression, but we also need to be focused on support. So we oftentimes talk about self-care, particularly in the Black community, and that's critically important. It's critically important. But I got to tell you right now, based on what we've talked about tonight and what we continue to grapple with on a daily basis, we need group care. We need to be there supporting each other, connecting with each other. I realize that we're in this COVID-19 environment where it's about social distancing, or should I say physical distancing. I tend to use the word physical over social, because I believe we still should be social, right? But we have to be there for each other and give the other in our own community the benefit of the doubt, and do our best to think in a positive way about each other, while at the same time, as Anthony McGriff has said, as Dexter McKinney has said, and others, we have to have a mindset of equity. And I know that my colleague, LaShan M Lovelace, would agree with me that every decision that we make, it should be made from a lens of equity. Are people who are going to be impacted by our decisions getting the resources that they need in order to have the same level of support, of the same level of accommodation that others? Now, so Keith, what are you saying? Are you saying that we in the Black community are not doing that enough? I think we are doing it. We just need to do it more, but we need to make sure that white folks do it as well. And that's a problem for me in many ways, because it's a piece that I grapple with on a daily basis as an educator, as someone who's serving in the role that I'm serving. Why do I have to always tell white folks to do it? Shouldn't they know to do that by now? It's education 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So yes, we still have to do it, but we do it from the vantage point that we're in this together. And if they don't understand that positive coexistence means accountability on their part, then it's important for us to remind them of it, right? And it's tiring. It's actually to the point of fatigue for many of us, because we've done this so much and so long, while at the same time, it's each one teach one. You remember that phrase or that saying? And that's exactly where we are in this moment, because this has to be, the year 2020 has to be a transformative year. And I'm not going to begin, if God gives me grace to live to see 2021 with another year like 2020. We have to make this transformative, which means everyone is going to have to engage in their own introspection, right? So I think going forward, we have to come with a lens of equity, but also make sure that we are engaging in constant education and reminding white folks that they have to educate themselves in the process.
Appreciate that, Dr. Alford. And LaShan, if I could get you to kind of chime in and follow up on Dr. Alford's response. I mean, I would love to hear your analysis. You know, your experience is extremely valuable to our conversation. So any thoughts you can give us on this? We cannot hear you. Is your audio? We still are having a little trouble hearing you.
It may be a settings issue, LaShan, if you can check that. Can I just, while LaShan is checking that piece, just add one more comment to
Go ahead, Dr.
what I was going to say, particularly in reference to what Mr. Mays was saying in terms of defunding the police. I'm not a proponent of that, but I am a proponent of using the funds that are funneled to the police to engage in community building in the African-American community, in the African-American neighborhoods, in the African-American surroundings. And so how do we ensure that that piece is occurring with police departments across the country in our Black communities? And that should be a $1 million operation, if not a $1 billion operation.
Sean, did we get you back in there?
Yes, can you all hear me now?
Thank you.
All right, all right. I'm not sure what occurred there, but as mentioned by all the other panelists, again, thank you all for the opportunity to join. I think it's a very important conversation that's being had this evening. As it pertains to the question at hand, again, I concur with Dr. Alford. The goal is to elevate equity. How do we do that? Equity should be an action. It is an actionable approach that has to be taken. When we think about policies, procedures, when we think about how we engage one another within our community and abroad, how do we elevate equity and put that into action? That should always be at the forefront of our thought process. I think that the things that Brother McGriff as well as Brother McKinney have stated, the lived experience. How do we talk about our lived experience but translate that into a shift in narrative? How do we shift that narrative so folks can, one, understand, but also elevate that in a way where it is streamlined the practices that are in place? So I think once we become civically engaged and look at it from a civic responsibility and not look at it from a civically ignorant lens, we can really start seeing how these systems have been put in place strategically and how we can strategically infuse change. So I think some of the onus is on us as a people, but also utilizing key players that are involved to shift that narrative. So that is the approach that I would hope others would consider as we continue to fight forward and try to shift things in a better way.
Man, brother, I sure appreciate you saying that, because there's something that you just mentioned there, civic responsibility. We cannot be upset with the laws if we're not out there to vote. If we're not going out there just saying, oh, no, this person's got it. We have one advocate in our community that we expect to fight for us. That's just not going to work. We need to go there and vote every single time there's an election to make sure we have folks that care for our community, care for the issues that are important to us, so that we can start to grow and build from there. That civic responsibility is vital, and I sure appreciate you bringing that up. And with that due, I want to thank all of the panelists. That ends my portion of this panel discussion tonight, but I'll turn it back over to Brother Palmer.
Yeah, thank you so much, panelists. We really appreciate you guys coming out. For those of you who don't know, my name is Marques Palmer. I'm a Spring 20 initiate into the Theta Theta Xi chapter of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. And now we're going to go into the Q&A portion of this panel. We have enough time to get some questions in. Does anybody want to start that hasn't spoke already? Don't raise your hands at once. All right, Oliver, then we can go Fatima.
All right, so thank y'all for coming. Y'all had like a great conversation. But I just want to know, what do y'all think is like the first thing that we need to do to fix the criminal justice system? I know that there's like a lot of factors and like a lot going on right now that people want to like change in it. But I want to know, I want to get y'all thoughts on like, what do you think the first thing we need to change is?
Oliver, I'm just going to take a stab at this just because I think we've all kind of hit on this question, and I don't think there is just one place to start or one thing to do, because it's everywhere. So I don't think there's one answer, but I think that we need to be strategic in our approach and make sure that I think that just like education, in America, people who have more get more, and I'm fine with that, but I don't think that should apply to things we all deserve. Justice and the right to life or healthcare are things I think that we all deserve equally, regardless of your financial status. So when it comes to what we need to do, I think we need to look at who are the worst off people and how is this system or institution working just as hard and fairly for those who are the worst off, because we all deserve education, a right to live, and justice at the same amount. Just because you have more money doesn't mean you should get better representation in court, doesn't mean you should get a heart before me in a transplant, and it doesn't mean you deserve to go to a school with better computers, because there's nothing a kid can do to earn a worse education than another person. So it needs to start from the bottom up.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at kind of chiming in as well. I'm obviously not an expert, but I think the industrial prison complex as a whole just needs to be dismantled. People shouldn't benefit from, people being locked in cages in a place where, the land of the free, right? We have like a quarter of the world's imprisoned bodies, obviously largely Black and brown. You got places in the world like in Germany where people commit crimes, egregious crimes, and they may be serving a certain amount of time, but they're allowed to live like a human being. They don't have correctional officers who are armed to the teeth with that. Just when you get somebody coming at you with all of these like with all this weaponry and all this armor, you kind of naturally want to defend yourself. And what they have there is like, you can go out to work in society as you come home. And I'm watching these documentaries. I mean, these people have like killed people, not to say like, you know, there shouldn't be a punishment for murder, but they don't treat you as if you are disposable and of no use to this world. They kind of have this thing where it's like, all right, we're going to try to rehabilitate you. We're going to try to educate you. We're going to try to see where you fell short. A lot of times you got these people where, you know, they've had no structure. They had no family. They may have been, you know, trauma. They never had a chance to grow up and make adult decisions with a fair shake. And so, you know, you got a lot of kids in prison that are serving life in prison that have been in prison since they was like 14, 15. And you, as an adult, as a man, I know you don't really develop the consequence, whatever that is, I don't know, in your like frontal cortex, that you don't develop the part of your brain that allows you to weigh consequences till you like 25, 26. And when you got somebody that's poor, no parents, you know, people have gone through a lot as children, they make a decision that you say, okay, well, we're just gonna go ahead and throw you away. And we're gonna profit in doing so. Oh, you're gonna fail third grade English? Okay, we're gonna build another prison bed because we know we're gonna be able to throw you in there. It's just, there's too much incentivized profiting where you can like invest on the stock market for, you know, people to be thrown away. I just think there's other ways to make a buck. And to me, it's just like a wealth thing. I think a lot of it had to do with class. And then we make it look like it's racism because we need all you guys to not join together or some Black Panther stuff and be this whole coalition and everybody versus the powerful. Now we're going to make it seem like at least you white, even though you broke, but at least you white. So you better off than the poor Black guy. And really it comes down to something that people is just going over, you know, certain people's heads.
I'd like to just chime in very quickly. I think that one approach is strategic infusion. So and for strategic infiltration as well. So I think that, you know, when you're addressing opportunities to engage the criminal justice system or what is wrong with it or how we shift it, I think, you know, focusing on one particular initiative that in your community that you can really hone in on and really think about how we can address and try to shift. I mean, we look at, I'm new to Syracuse. I relocated here from Virginia, but when I look at the difference between Syracuse city schools compared to other K through 12 schooling systems, I see the difference night and day. I have my daughter who is in third grade. Just the resources that are available to her at the particular school that she is attending compared to what I know is not relevant or available in the city, like I said, it's night and day. So focusing on one particular initiative that you know can get traction, find a means to strategically infuse a sound message and shift that narrative is truly a key to start making the change that you want to see on a broader scale. I think a lot of times, you know, it's easy to say we need to change this, we need to change this from a large scale standpoint, but how can we do that on a local level to really start seeing the change that we need to see for the people who are directly affected by said issue that is at hand? So those are just some thoughts that I have in regards to the strategic infusion as well as infiltration that is needed to address the broader system.
We have prosecution policies, arrest policies, and sentencing policies all need to be unpacked. And they need to be unpacked in a way that it's actually one by one, review. That's one way to address the system in totality. It's hard for me to pinpoint exactly one piece of the whole equation, but when I look at the arrests that continue to be, again, disproportionately impacted vis-a-vis Black males, Black people in general, but also Black females. And I see that we have some Black women on this call, and I want to make sure that we hear their voices because they are targets as well. So it's an unpacking that needs to occur, and we need to hold our lawmakers accountable to see that actually happens.
I just 1 second. This is an onion. There's so many layers to that question, the criminal justice system as a whole. So I'm just going to be real brief and talk about your initial entry to the criminal justice system is through police officers on the ground. Your patrol officers are the ones who are responsible for that first uh, interaction with the criminal justice system. And I said it previously that those officers need to be better trained. We need to send out officers for de-escalation training, okay, nonviolent crisis intervention training, and we need to continue to build those community policing departments within the police department to better engage law enforcement within the community. And we need to start seeing officers who resemble, again, the communities in which we serve. How do we do that? We go to our local leaders, our mayors, our pastors, our local leaders, and we demand that our departments start recruiting minorities. I know in New Jersey there's departments who have affirmative action hiring for officers who are Black and brown. And I don't know if that's something that's going on in Syracuse or in areas in which we all live, but my 2 cents is that we just need officers in our culture who understand the culture.
Thank you, Brother Mace. Thank you. We're running out on some time right now. I see a couple of raised hands. We're gonna get to one more question, but I see Victoria had her hand raised. Do you still want to speak?
We skipped Fatima.
Yeah, her question is gonna come. Vicky just wanted to comment on something. Her question is coming.
Actually, Fatima, you can ask your question and then I'll go.
So I just wanted to touch on, my name is Fatima, everyone. Thank you for having us at this event. So I just wanted to touch on how in America, there are many young men dying at the hands of the government. And I think that we can all agree that it's very important to recognize how involved in Black Lives Matter movements that women are. However, it still seems to be an issue with shedding light on Black women and their encounters with police brutality, as we have all seen with Breonna Taylor. So how can you all, as Black men, men of color in positions and platforms that allow you to use your voice to make sure that the movement supports both men and women of color, how can you all make sure that Black women feel protected and included in this movement?
I'd love to take this question. I think that being an ally, or even as a man, I think that we're fed this message of like protect women. We even have like shirts now, right? Protect Black women, and we're socialized to like be their superheroes or like, you know, defend them. And I think that it's really important that we stand with women, not for them. We know this is true of white people when it comes to race, as men when it comes to gender. We just can't understand what women understand. Like we'll never understand anything because we live in a society where your gender has a huge influence on your experience, just like your race. So we need to be willing to come to the conversation and invite more women in. And I really appreciate Dr. Alford's comment that we need to get more Black women in this conversation, because that there is an example of like us, like just our bias, right? I wrote down that feedback I need to give my brothers here is that we need a more diverse panel next time. You know, and we have to be humble enough and vulnerable enough to admit that, hey, we just messed up like we just did. And we needed to be more women voices on here because we can't speak for them. We can speak with them. We can lift their voices. We can try to come to the conversation and understand a little bit more. But yeah, thank you, Dr. Alford, for making that comment. And bros, let's make sure we get some women up here next time.
Yeah, actually, I would love to piggyback on that because I think, you know, you really, you know, got us on a good start there. How many of you, does anybody watch Lovecraft Country? Anybody? Yeah? Okay, so we got one. So you, LaShan, you would understand this then. If you remember the episode with Hippolyta, and it was called I Am, her being able to say anything and be anything that she says. So one of the biggest takeaways that I had from that was how us as men, and especially Black men, we don't even realize that we're not uplifting our Black women. And it's very subtle in a lot of, ways that we behave, things that we say or don't say. And one of the really important things I want us to keep in mind is that, they don't, women don't need us to just speak up for them. They are more than capable, more than qualified. We need to be their best advocate and supporters. We should not let anybody disrespect them, including ourselves. We should not be the ones out here saying, oh no, she's just, a jump off or anything. Because, the hypocriticalness that we have within our own community and as Black men is a problem. And we will never be able to accomplish the goals in the Black community if we don't come together and realize that we are also contributing to the same narratives that white folks out here, are saying about us and saying about, our Black women. I mean, so I appreciate you, Ant, for, highlighting, the need to have more diversity. And let's call it out. We need more Black women on panels like these because we can't have this conversation just as men. It does us no good to not hear your perspectives and your thoughts, and also to have that implemented into everything that we do. It's just as important, it's just as vital, and that's honestly where our society is going. Women are ruling this country, and if you aren't with it, you have a problem with that, that's on you. There's more than enough opportunity out here to go around, and we just have to make sure that everyone gets that same access and and opportunity to capitalize on those. So I appreciate you kicking that off, Ed.
I want to say something real quick because I know we short on time, but I really appreciate what all of you have said. And not only do we need the presence of more women, but the same sort of tactic that Dr. Keefe used. We need to amplify those voices when they are present, right? We need to, a lot of times what happens is like women get, specifically Black women, I think most of us understand that our Black women are the least respected and the least, they're the last for somebody to come and speak up for. And that should be our job. That should be our sort of mantle, right? Like, not to make it about whatever, but there was a situation, I forget the rapper's name, where she was sort of shot by a guy. And sometimes people are like joking about it, but that's an example to say, no, that's not, regardless of what happened, that's not okay. And it's and to publicly speak out about that and say, listen, we have to support them publicly, and be sure that when we're in those situations. Oh, you were trying to say something. Fatima was trying to say something. Can you get her back into the conversation, so that their voices are heard when they are present?
If you don't mind, I would just like to add one quick thing. I believe you were referring to the great philosopher Meg the Stallion, with this sister who got shot. But nevertheless, a great example of that, if we think about the last vice presidential debate with Senator Harris, and how at the conclusion of the debate, how literally all the analysts were saying how she couldn't do this and she couldn't do that. Why do you all think that is? So we see it from a national of this woman of color is running for vice president of the United States, and they are already putting her in a box saying what she can and can't do. It is up to us to address and uplift that when we see that on a day-to-day basis and on this national platform. So just keep that in mind, fellas.
Well, and one thing,
That's the reason why we want to hear from another woman on this panel right now.
I think that, just as important as that is, I don't want us to forget that we have a lot of Black men that have never seen some of those heights and some of those, career opportunities. So you have a lot of salty Black men, that are like, nah, this, I haven't even gotten that. So why should I, be supporting somebody else? But we have to get out of that mentality. It ain't always about us. We need to be uplifting every single one of us. The more we uplift each other, the further we progress. And getting outside of the salty mindset because it didn't happen to you is, something that we've got to be able to start, coming to grasp.
Would one of you ladies like to come off and just share what do you think that you need, or what do you want for support from men? This is a great literacy moment we could have right now.
Dominique got her hand raised.
I think that's definitely like a loaded question.
You muted.
Oh, sorry. Good. Yeah. So I think that's a loaded question just because there's so many facets of like what I think is needed from the Black man when it comes to us. The Black woman is literally the most disrespected woman in America. And I think that for us, it's like having to fight the battle of race alone and then not even having the men that are supposed to protect you and be there for you do it. It makes the battle 10 times harder. So I think something that, and I think someone mentioned it too, whether it's in a classroom setting, like seeing the fact that someone is speaking over one of the only Black girls in the room and not saying anything, seeing her being disrespected online. You're too dark, you're too this, you guys have an attitude, you guys are the angry Black woman. Like just things like this that are perpetuated after generation and generation and nothing is being done about it. Like it's really a hit that we take all the time. And I think just to sum it up, it's like Black women are known for putting everything else aside to step up for Black men. The people that created Black Lives Matter are 3 queer Black women. So that's putting their own gender in question aside. That's putting their race aside. That's putting everything aside to step up and be there for those who don't often have their backs. Because let's face it, like our community is very homophobic. So that's women putting aside the fact that Black men aren't really supporting, you know, their sexual orientation, their identity, and being there for people who don't always, you know, who's not always there for them. So I think in turn, it's just transparency. You know, being there for us, we'll be there for you. That's like the simplest way to put it.
Can I jump in for a minute to follow Dominique? I tell you, when you talk about these are atrocities against Black women that have occurred over generations, I had this big knot to occur in my belly. I mean, that is really profound. And it's also sad, but it also is a rallying cry for us to get busy, right? Simply because we don't want to see another generation or another period, if you will, in our nation's history, in our society's history, where colorism is even more advanced in terms of how we understand or even quote unquote treat Black women. And the fact that Senator Harris had to say during the last debate, vice presidential debate, I'm speaking. You're interrupting me, I'm speaking. And that was a powerful moment because that woman, that Black woman was telling that white vice president that don't interrupt me, I'm speaking. And that's exactly what we're saying in terms of how we need to support our sisters who are our comrades in so many ways. So Dominique, I appreciate what you're saying. I know Gabrielle wanted to offer a comment as well.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Dominique was saying, I think there's a huge power in just feeling important. So I think Black women, you know, first and foremost, we just want to feel important to our Black men, especially. So as someone mentioned on this call, it's not necessarily Black women up. We've learned to be our own voice of advocacy. We've learned to be that powerful voice where just as Senator Kamala Harris did on that debate, she said, excuse me, I'm speaking. We've learned how to make our voice heard even when those try to overpower us. But I think for me personally, and I think a lot of other women feel the same way, Black women feel the same way, just feeling like we are the most important to our Black men. That goes a very long way in a lot of situations, feeling like we are the epitome of the woman for you and we have your undivided support in a sense. I think that would really be what is needed. You know, we've learned, you know, the Black woman is one of the most successful groups in America, if not the most successful group. However, you know, we deal with all of these other issues. So I think we don't need Black men to reach these heights that we've reached. We need them for that very basic support of you're important to us, we care, we see you, and even when others try to break you down, you know, you're still that pedestal for us.
Also, I wanted to add my little comment, but basically I feel like the biggest problem is empowering us when it's needed and not empowering us when it's beneficial, because I see a lot of times, for instance, Kamala Harris, when she spoke up, everybody's like, oh my God, like a Black woman actually spoke up. But if personally you have relationships with Black women, you don't like that she speaks up, you don't like that she's argumentative, you don't like that she's the angry Black woman. But when it's called for, you like that. Like, so for me, a biggest problem is the disgusting fetish that is had with other people that are not just like other women that are not just Black. Like, if you meet a light-skinned Black person, it's, oh, what are you mixed with? And if she's not mixed with nothing, you don't want to have no dealings with her because she's an angry Black woman. But if you see a person like Kamala Harris speaking up, it's like, oh my God, I need to empower Black women. So it's not, for me, it's not picking and choosing when you want to use us for your benefit.
I thank everybody for coming. These are some crucial points that we don't have all the time in the world for right now, but we need to encourage these kind of conversations happening outside of a Zoom screen, happening outside of, like, they need to happen in classrooms. They need to happen everywhere. I would like to thank all the panelists for coming out. I want to thank everyone for being on the camera. This conversation was deep, and we still won't get the answer today. So let's encourage more people to do things like these at different times, even when people are uncomfortable, even when some people don't want to have these conversations. Hopefully we can have more events like these again and get more people and have a diverse panel. But again, I want to thank you guys for coming. Let's go encourage people out to vote, and have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Brother Palmer.
No doubt.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Yo, good job, bros. Kwaku, Marques.
Thank you.